Sometimes you hear something about a relationship, especially an intimate one, and it makes you go, ew. But as long as no one is getting hurt, then you do you. And if it gives some people the ick factor, then that's a them problem, not a you problem. But if the much younger party turns against the elders, yes, I did say that plurally, in the worst way, then the motives for the relationship in the first place will have been questionable. In today's case, two men from London apparently trust the wrong man to form something of a throuple with. This is the terribly sad case of Paul Longworth and Albert Alfonso. And this is Murder of Crows. Paul Longworth and Albert Alfonso weren't your typical couple. They'd been together for over a decade, sharing a 3-story house in Shepherd's Bush in London since 2013. But by the time they entered a civil partnership in February of 2023, their relationship had already shifted into something altogether more complicated. The fact that they had entered a legal partnership showed that they were committed to each other and were choosing to be so. But on an intimate level, their relationship was wholly different. Paul was 71 and was a quiet Irishman who'd spent his entire working life as a handyman. And even in retirement, he could not resist fixing things. And his tools remained organised, ready for any project that came up next. Neighbours knew him as a very gentle gentleman, someone who'd never raise his voice or turn down any requests for help. Pretty much your salt of the earth and laid back kind of fella. Now Albert was altogether different. At 62, the French-born swimming instructor still had the energy of someone half his age. He'd earned British citizenship and taught at the Maud Club in Acton, where students appreciated his no-nonsense and matter-of-fact approach to teaching. He was always pushing for improvement in himself and others, both professionally and personally. And the relationship between the couple had evolved over more than a decade. So by the time they entered a civil partnership in February of 2023, they were more like devoted friends and soulmates than lovers. Paul preferred quiet evenings and simple companionship, while Albert had developed interests in extreme sexual practices that Paul could not and would not share. So their solution was a practical one. They remained housemates and the closest of friends, while Albert pursued his sexual interests elsewhere. And it seemed that they were both more than happy with the arrangement, and jolly good for them. Albert's bedroom had become something of a film studio, equipped with 4 cameras that recorded his encounters with various partners. He uploaded edited footage to adult websites under aliases like Iron Blood Master, and earning money from subscribers. Paul knew about Albert's activities and accepted them as part of their arrangement. Okay, you do you. In 2012, Albert had discovered webcam platforms that connected him with performers all over the world. And one that he connected with was a young Colombian man using the rather descriptive alias Mr. Dick 20 centimeters. Albert's interests were largely based around racial domination fantasies, where he, as a white submissive, would be degraded and controlled by a black or Latino master. These virtual sessions involved extreme scenarios that pushed boundaries of pain and humiliation. For over a decade, Albert and the Colombian performer, whose real name was Justin Andres Mosquera, maintained their relationship entirely virtually through computer screens and webcams. Albert paid approximately $80 per session for custom videos and live performances, while Mosquera provided this domination content from his modest circumstances in Medellin, Colombia. The virtual relationship became physical in 2022 when Albert decided to visit Colombia in person. The contrast between their circumstances was a stark one. Albert arrived at luxury resorts with money to spend freely, while Mosquera lived in working-class conditions where such wealth was just purely beyond any level of achievement. They stayed at 5-star accommodations accessible only by private speedboat, with amenities that cost more per night than most Colombians earned in a month. Paul often accompanied Albert on these trips, understanding his partner's proclivities, even if he didn't share them. For Mosquera, these glimpses of extreme luxury must have been more tantalizing and frustrating. A week living like royalty, followed by a return to his far more modest circumstances, while his clients flew back to their comfortable London life. The relationship gradually shifted from purely transactional to something far more akin to friendship. Albert began providing additional support beyond payment for sexual services, helping with English lessons and offering advice about potential opportunities abroad. When Albert suggested that Mosquera visit London, it seemed like a natural progression of their evolving connection and friendship. In June of 2024, Mosquera arrived at Heathrow Airport carrying the few possessions he had in his life in a battered maroon suitcase. Albert had paid for the flight and arranged for Mosquera to stay in the spare room of their home on a 3-month tourist visa. The arrangement seemed generous. Free accommodation, free meals, and even English lessons at Ealing College, along with a guest membership at Albert's swimming club. But let us not forget, Mosquera's unease may have been brewing since the apparent unfairness and contrast of their relative means while in Colombia. For Mosquera, the lifestyle in London was nothing short of revelatory. The couple's home was comfortable and well appointed, their approach to money casual and largely unconcerned, highlighting the vast difference between their circumstances and Mosquera's own back in Medellin, Colombia. And tensions began building beneath the surface hospitality. Mosquera would later claim that Albert had failed to pay him for sexual services as promised, leaving him feeling exploited. But a man who had been making a living from self-exploitation and who had been living rent-free and needing to pay for next to nothing, claiming to be something of a victim is a bit rich, but I digress. Whether these claims were accurate or convenient fabrications for his later defense, they reflected a growing dissatisfaction that was about to take a dark turn. And if there were any thoughts of genuine friendship underlying the transactional nature of the unconventional three-way relationship, at least on Mosquera's part, well, they would be blown out of the water by Mosquera's later actions and attitude. The first signs of Mosquera's true intentions emerged through his internet activity during late June and early July of 2024. Digital forensics would later reveal a disturbing pattern of research that painted a clear picture of premeditation. He searched for information about London serial killers, researched methods of poisoning and body disposal, and most significantly investigated the value of properties in Shepherd's Bush. Christ, when will criminals learn that Google is not their friend in this era of digital forensics? And speaking of those digital forensics, even more damning was his unauthorized access to Paul and Albert's financial information. He had somehow obtained their banking passwords and login details, copying spreadsheets containing this sensitive information onto his laptop. By July the 4th, he had attempted to open bank accounts using their address and was researching property values back home in Medellin, Colombia. On the morning of July the 8th, 2024, as London was suffering a heat wave reaching up to 32 degrees Celsius, Mosquera conducted his final preparations. Using Spanish language searches, he researched whether blows to the head could be fatal and how much damage such attacks might cause. Now, these searches were conducted while Paul was still very much alive and had been seen going about his completely normal routine. At around midday, Albert was at work finishing his final week as a swimming instructor before retirement. Paul was alone with Mosquera, enjoying what he thought was a perfectly normal and peaceful afternoon. Between 12:30 and 1 p.m., neighbours observed the black curtains being drawn at number 13 Scots Road, the couple's home. Not considered a significant detail at the time, but notable when put into context later. What happened next was swift and brutal. As Paul entered the bathroom, Mosquera struck him from behind with Paul's own hammer, and the attack was vicious, with 9 devastating blows to the back of the skull that shattered bone and destroyed brain tissue. Paul's defensive wounds on his hands showed that he had tried to protect himself, but the assault was too sudden and overwhelming and too brutal to be survivable. The efficiency of the killing suggested calculation rather than a crime of passion. Mosquera quickly hid Paul's body under the divan bed in his bedroom, locked the door, and began preparing for Albert's return. He had approximately 8 hours to set the stage for the second murder. When Albert arrived home that evening at around 10 p.m., he was obviously unaware that Paul was already dead. The explanation for Paul's absence or the locked bedroom door remains unknown. But Albert proceeded with his normal routine. According to Mosquera's later testimony, Albert wanted sex, something that happened multiple times daily. You have to admire Albert's stamina, if nothing else. They went to Albert's bedroom where the 4 cameras were positioned to record their encounter. Albert wore his usual setup, a black leather eye mask and swimming cap. Zorro goes swimming. And the session began like many others, with Albert taking his submissive role, while Mosquera dominated him according to their established dynamic. At approximately 10:15 p.m., with Albert positioned on all fours and facing away, Mosquera struck, taking Albert's chin with his left hand as if caressing it. He pulled the older man's head back and plunged an 8-inch knife deep into his neck with his right hand. Blood spurted from the severed artery as Albert struggled to escape. What happened next truly indicated Mosquera's feelings towards the man who had ultimately tried to help and befriend him. The audio from the cameras captured Mosquera taunting his victim, with him saying, "You likey," as he repeatedly stabbed Albert 13 times in the face, neck, and chest. Finally, he slit Albert's throat from ear to ear. The death wasn't swift. Albert could be heard struggling to breathe before his body finally went limp. And Mosquera still wasn't quite finished showing his true character yet. As Albert lay dying, Mosquera placed the man's body on a plastic sheet and burst into song, dancing naked while covered in blood. Within minutes of the murder, he was at Albert's computer, accessing spreadsheets containing banking information and researching property values in Colombia. Poor man's body wasn't even cold. The investigation began not in London, but 114 miles away on the Clifton Suspension Bridge in Bristol. And it is here where, as the case has seemed unfamiliar up to now, some of you may recognize the following scenario from news reports. At approximately 11:20 p.m. on July the 10th, 2024, maintenance workers noticed a man struggling with two heavy suitcases near the bridge's pedestrian walkway. The cases seemed to be extremely heavy, with one having a broken handle and damaged wheels. When bridge staff approached to investigate, they observed a reddish liquid seeping from one of the cases. The man, speaking broken English with a heavy accent, claimed that the cases contained car parts and insisted the red substance was engine oil. When pressed further by a cyclist who had also stopped to help, the man abandoned both suitcases and fled into nearby Lee Woods. Despite attempts to pursue him, he disappeared into the darkness.
It's really heavy and there's blood coming out of it. So we're going to need some police up here quite urgently, I think. We had a gentleman up here who was dragging a case behind him, a black gentleman. At the time we were speaking to him, he didn't speak English, and a guy on a bike had stopped who actually spoke Spanish, so we were trying to have a conversation with him. He says the cases, the wheels are broken and what have you. He says there's car parts and the case is broken, it's really heavy and there's blood coming out of it. Right. It looks like there's blood coming out of the case. He then said there were two cases, so he went up the road to get the second case. The guy on the bike, who's just a member of the public, followed him. The guy has now run off. We're now with the case. I mean, it might not be blood. He said it was car parts, oil. It doesn't smell of that at all. It looks like blood to us.
Do the tags on it have any names or anything on them?
Yes. The guy says to Mr. Albert.
Hang on, your officers are here now.
Okay, brilliant.
By 12:07 a.m. on July the 11th, Avon and Somerset police had arrived to investigate the abandoned luggage. Inside the suitcases, officers made a grisly discovery. The silver trunk contained a human torso wearing a black Giorgio Armani t-shirt, wrapped in a white towel and Marks and Spencer's blanket. The maroon suitcase held another dismembered torso, wrapped only in an Arsenal Football Club beach towel. The breakthrough came, if you can call it a breakthrough, just stupidity if you ask me, when a luggage label was found still attached to the silver trunk. The tag bore the names Paul Longworth and Albert Alfonso, along with their complete home address on Scott's Road in Shepherd's Bush. You'd have thought Mosquera would have checked this, but evidently he had not. Detective Chief Inspector Ollie Stride of the Metropolitan Police received the call that would launch what he later described as one of the most harrowing murders his team had ever investigated. At 4:30 a.m. on July the 11th, armed officers forced entry to the Shepherd's Bush property. What they discovered defied imagination. In Albert's bedroom, blood spatter patterns revealed the location of what had been a violent struggle. Most shocking was the kitchen discovery. A chest freezer purchased just days before contained the severed heads of both victims. Albert's head still wore the black leather eye mask and swimming cap from their final intimate encounter. Jesus Christ on a rickshaw. The digital evidence proved as crucial as the physical crime scene. Albert's cameras had captured his murder in graphic detail, providing investigators with unprecedented insight into both the killer's methods and his psychological state. The footage showed Mosquera remaining calm and controlled throughout the attack, and this would be used to refute any claims of self-defense or loss of control. When examiners assessed Mosquera's laptop, it revealed the timeline of premeditation. His browser history showed searches for serial killers London, methods of body disposal, and research into the couple's property value and banking arrangements. Most damning, as suggested earlier, were searches conducted in Spanish about fatal head injuries, researched on the very morning of Paul's brutal murder. The manhunt for Mosquera involved coordination between multiple police forces. After fleeing the bridge, he had vanished into the Bristol area, prompting a full city-wide search. His arrest came at 2:15 a.m. on July the 13th at Bristol Temple Meads railway station, where he was found sitting on a bench wearing a t-shirt still stained with Albert's blood, along with missing one shoe. Probably a separate episode in itself, the missing shoe.
I've got a hand, mate.
Go.
Yeah. I'll say the words then. When it's secure. Go. Stay down, John. Yeah.
Oh my God. What happened?
Secure.
On your side, mate.
What happened?
Move your legs out to the front. Sit up.
At this time, mate, you're under arrest on suspicion of murder. You don't have to say anything, but may harm your defence if you do not mention when questioned, something you later rely in court. Anything you do say may be given evidence. Do you understand?
Yes, no. What?
You are currently under arrest for murder, okay? What's your name, mate?
What?
What's your name? Nombre.
Jot.
Jot.
Yeah.
Jot or Joss?
Jot.
Surname? Jot what?
Jot. Mosquera.
Mosquera?
Yeah.
Victims that was later identified. What we've got at that stage, we've got an address label on a suitcase, a very old address label on a suitcase, and I've got an address in London where the person registered that address is still moving around, or their phone is at least.
Yeah.
So it's a lead, but it's not telling me anything specific at that time.
But by now, rumours are starting. Why is there a forensic tent on the most famous gateway to the region's biggest city? Brunel's Great Bridge is one of Bristol's biggest tourist draws, but today's spectacle is police tape and cordons as people ask why. There's loose talk of body parts and suitcases, soon confirmed.
Sadly, the suitcases contained human remains. An immediate search of the area was carried out by officers on the ground.
Police have the image from the cyclist's video. Have you seen this man? They try to calm a city that's stunned.
At this stage, we are not aware of any current risk he poses to the wider public. However, if anyone sees him, we advise them not to approach him, and please do call 999 immediately.
Just describe what you saw, what happened. Now news has broken. Witnesses come forward. Roger Malone, the former HTV News sports presenter, he'd been with his son waiting for a taxi and watched the suspect struggling with suitcases before crossing the bridge.
Going on. This big guy is trying to drag a huge suitcase across here and he couldn't pick it up. You know, it was so heavy, and a couple of people were helping him get it across. And my son, he likes to talk to people. He said, "Hello, mate." He said, "What have you got in there? That's heavy, isn't it? You're dragging that across. What have you got in there? A body?"
It becomes apparent the suspect had been stuck, so tried another tactic.
As that was unsuccessful, a taxi was then ordered, which literally took our offender from just this side of the bridge by the Mall and Clifton just over the other side, literally 200-300 yards.
So now, on July the 12th, 36 hours after the suitcases were first seen, the inquiry's second strand in West London leads to a further gruesome discovery.
Wasn't that concerned about that address, but there was a niggling doubt in my mind that I needed to go into that address. Okay, I think it did become quite obvious quite quickly that it's probably where the murder had taken place. Prior to that, I'd received information that there was a torso in each suitcase. So I now knew that I had at least 2 victims. There were body parts missing, but we knew with 2 torsos, we had at least 2 victims. So the officers that went into Scots Road in Shepherd's Bush, the Met Police, found a freezer within that premises, which had the missing body parts in it.
The remains are identified as 62-year-old swimming instructor Albert Alfonso and his partner Paul Longworth, who was 71. People here say for the last few weeks the pair's had a visitor from Colombia, a 34-year-old, Justin Mosquera. So what's happened? Soon police will look at security cameras. The footage shows Paul Longworth at the windows of his flat talking with a friend on the street. It's mid-morning 2 days earlier, the 8th of July. At lunchtime, Mosquera is seen closing the curtains. Detectives believe soon afterwards Mr. Longworth is murdered, hit around the head and stuffed under a bed. Half an hour later, Mosquera has opened the curtains, the killing done. That evening, Albert Alfonso returns home from the gym with Mosquera, unaware his partner is dead and hidden. He and Mosquera are seen walking into the flat. Within an hour and a half, Mosquera would murder him too, as they have sex. The murder is filmed on 2 cameras. The trial's jury would have to watch the killing happen. Moments afterwards, Mosquera is filmed performing a dance.
Twist is awful into mala carne.
Okay, bear in mind we're 48 hours later now. He's had no sightings of him. You know, this is the male that's wearing quite distinctive clothing. It's all over the press, nationally, and in Bristol, and there's been no sightings of this of the male.
The breakthrough comes after Mosquera has been on the run for 2 full days.
By midnight on the Friday night, I had a phone call from a superintendent in the Met Police who was running their manhunt side of it, saying that his phone was moving again in Bristol. It had come live again in the Clifton area, and we could track the phone along Hot Wells Road. He's walking through Bristol right during the nighttime economy on a Friday night, Saturday morning, walking through the centre of Bristol, one shoe on, having had his picture put all over the press, and nobody phoned us to say they'd seen him, which was quite a concern for me. So what we did then is I called up on our surveillance teams. It's just a guess, but an educated guess, that he was going to be going towards the train station. So by the time I mobilised the surveillance team and the armed officers, they intercepted him at Bristol Temple Meads just shortly after midnight on the Saturday morning.
Mosquera's first court appearance on July the 15th, 2024, at Westminster Magistrates Court required a Spanish translator. The prosecution outlined the basic facts. The men were brutally murdered and dismembered, their remains transported to Bristol, with substantial evidence pointing to Mosquera as the perpetrator. The case was remanded to the Old Bailey, initially scheduled for April of 2025. Mosquera's defence strategy emerged through preliminary hearings. They would not contest his killing of Albert Alfonso. The video evidence made denial completely impossible, but would argue manslaughter rather than murder, claiming loss of control. More controversially, they would argue that Albert had killed Paul, with Mosquera taking the role as additional possible victim, or the poor little lamb Let's all feel sorry for the murdery bastard. When the trial began on April the 29th, 2025, Prosecutor Deanna Hare Casey outlined the case methodically. She described how Mosquera had researched the murders weeks in advance, accessed financial information, and immediately attempted theft after the killings. The video evidence, she argued, showed complete control, not self-defense. However, in May of 2025, legal complications arose regarding the timing and admissibility of digital evidence. Mr. Justice Benathan discharged the jury and ordered a retrial simply to ensure that any conviction would be based on properly presented evidence. The retrial commenced on June the 30th, 2025 at Woolwich Crown Court. Mosquera's testimony, delivered through a translator, described what he characterized as months of sexual abuse and threats. He claimed Albert had raped him every day, and that their recorded encounters were coerced rather than consensual. But since Mosquera was the dominator in these situations, surely he could have stopped them, but that's by the by. Under cross-examination, inconsistencies in Mosquera's account became apparent. Most significantly, employment records proved that Albert was at work when Paul was killed, making Mosquera's claim that Albert was the murderer of Paul impossible to sustain. On July the 21st, 2025, after just 5 hours of deliberation, the jury unanimously found Mosquera guilty of both murders. The swift verdict reflected their rejection of his self-defense claims and acceptance of the premeditation evidence.
Breaking news as a man has been found guilty of murdering a couple and dumping their remains in suitcases near Bristol's Clifton Suspension Bridge. Albert Alfonso, who was 62, and 71-year-old Paul Longworth were killed at their flat in West London last July. A court has heard that 35-year-old Justin Andres Mosquera planned to steal money from them. Well, a warning, this report from Sky's Alice Porter includes details that viewers may find distressing.
In the dead of night, Justin Mosquera drags a suitcase towards Clifton Suspension Bridge in Bristol. One of 2 bags he claimed contained car parts. Instead, they were filled with human remains of 2 men he'd killed in London before transporting them across the country. His victims, a man he'd first met online, 62-year-old Albert Alfonso, and his civil partner, 71-year-old Paul Longworth. They all became friends. The couple visited Mosquera in Colombia, where he lived, and flew the 35-year-old, who was a porn star, to the UK to stay with them in London, while Alfonso and Mosquera would engage in extreme sex. These videos, played in court, show the 3 men in the weeks and days before the murders. The prosecution argued Mosquera was already planning the attacks. His laptop revealed online searches for fatal blows to the head. It was here in Shepherd's Bush in West London where the murders took place, in a flat which was shared by the couple. On the 8th of July, Mosquera killed Paul Longworth by hitting him over the head with a hammer. Later, during a sex session, Mosquera stabbed Albert Alfonso multiple times with a knife, killing him. Mosquera then decapitated the bodies. CCTV shows a freezer being delivered where the heads were stored. The other remains were put in suitcases. A van with a driver hired to transport Mosquera and the bags to the bridge in Bristol 2 days after the murders. Mosquera eventually dumped the cases on the bridge, When passers-by became suspicious, he ran off and police were called.
The case is broken and it looks like it's really heavy and there's blood coming out of it.
3 days after that, Mascara was arrested at Bristol Temple Meads train station.
What happened? Move your legs out to the front. Sit up. At this time, mate, you're under arrest on suspicion of murder.
Evidence in the cases led police to the London flat. They discovered the hammer used to kill Mr. Longworth and the freezer with the victims' heads. In court, Mascara claimed that Mr. Alfonso had repeatedly raped him, denying both murders, but admitting manslaughter of Alfonso by loss of control. But police found multiple video recordings of Mascara calmly killing Alfonso, contradicting his story.
The video that we found of the murder is really shocking. Within seconds of the murder, he appears to dance, sings a short song, and immediately after that, whilst Mr. Alfonso is still lying on the floor, he's straight on the computer and starts searching for going into financial accounts and logging into bank accounts, etc.
Mascara would try to steal money from Albert Alfonso as he lay dying. It was a grotesque end for these lifelong partners who, unknowingly, let a killer into their home. Alice Porter, Sky News.
The conviction brought legal closure to one of Britain's most disturbing recent murder cases, but the broader implications continue to resonate. Mr. Justice Benethan ordered a psychiatric report before sentencing, which is scheduled for October the 24th, 2025, while making clear that life imprisonment was inevitable. The impact on investigating officers has been profound. Detective Chief Inspector Stride acknowledged that his team had processed hundreds of hours of disturbing footage that would stay with all of us for a long time. The Metropolitan Police has since implemented additional psychological support protocols for officers working on extreme violence cases. The local community in Shepherd's Bush struggled to process that such brutality had occurred in their locale. The house at 13 Scots Road remains empty to this day, with its black curtains still drawn, and estate agents reporting difficulty marketing the property due to its violent history. I can't really say that I am surprised. The case has highlighted vulnerabilities in online relationships that cross significant economic and cultural boundaries. Digital rights advocates have pointed to the potential for exploitation when wealthy individuals from developed nations engage with performers from more developing countries. What makes the case particularly haunting is not simply the violence involved, but the cold calculation that preceded and followed it. Mosquera's methodical research into murder methods, his unauthorized access to financial information, and his immediate attempt to profit from his crimes revealed a mind focused not on emotional grievances, but rather on the material benefits he may gain from the deaths of his victims. As Mosquera awaits his final sentencing later this month, October 2025, facing the certainty of life imprisonment and eventual deportation, The memory of Paul and Albert serves as a tragic reminder of lives cut short by senseless violence. Albert may have been a risk-taker, but despite enjoying pain and degradation, there was never any sense that he desired death. And on the contrary, the way he lived his life suggested a man living and loving every minute of life. His partner, Paul, seemed to have essentially been just collateral damage and just an obstacle to what Mosquera wanted to achieve. Paul tolerated Albert's proclivities and would have been nothing but kind to Mosquera. This video is dedicated to these men, like chalk and cheese in their personalities, but with a lifelong loving bond beneath their differences. As we see so often on this channel, they trusted the wrong man and paid for this error of judgment with their lives. I send love and condolences to their friends and family, and to all of those touched by the ripples from this horrific event. Come on then. Thank you for watching another episode of Murder of Crows. Please like, share and subscribe, as doing any or all of these things apparently makes the algorithm do magical cartwheels or something, so I'm told. And if you do any or all of those things, it is very much appreciated. In other news, my channel will very soon be undergoing something of a reboot, if you will. The content will not be changing, but there will be something of an image shift in terms of my introductory credits, in terms of thumbnails, and in terms of exit cards. This is just purely a branding exercise. The content will remain largely the same. Sorry. But they say that you can't polish a turd, but guess what? You can roll it in glitter. That'll be happening in the next couple of episodes with any luck, so look forward to that. And with all of that said, I'm Steve. This fluffy muppet, This fluffy muppet is Samson, and we will see you when we see you.